Hi and welcome to Tales from the Gulag. Today is the 12th of May 2019, and if you've been following this video series, you'd have probably noticed the new look. Gone is my Where's Wally t-shirt, gone is my I know where Wally's t-shirt is, and now I suppose I have what you might call my dressing gown of wisdom. Days here are getting shorter, temperatures are getting lower, and this is a lot more comfortable, so that I hope you like the new look, because I'm not actually planning to change it in a hurry. Maybe I'll see you again come towards summer. But anyway, it is now just 6 days to go before we see what kind of a government Australia will live under. Just 1 week to go, well, even less, 6 days. Count them. Because of my work, I have already cast my ballot by postal vote, but of course the campaigning by all the political parties goes on. Most voters will sleep, while voters like me are cringing. Why are voters like me cringing? Because for me the choice is not so much Labor versus Liberal. It's not even just a choice between, say, a kick in the head versus a smack in the teeth. It's a choice between a soft dictatorship and maybe a slightly softer one. Dictatorship? Are you crazy? Are we going to have a mustachioed dictator goose-stepping across the lawns at Kirribilli House? Are we to imagine 2-minute hate sessions every morning at work? Second thoughts, could be. Well, this is Australia. We are a nation with a constitution. So how can we possibly wind up being a dictatorship? How can that be? Of course, lots of countries like, say, I don't know, Venezuela or South Africa, that have a democratic constitution, that are now effectively dictatorships, especially the former. Well, how did this happen? They elected democratic socialists. This is not those socialists who came to power at the end of a civil war of their own making. These were decided at the ballot box, and you look at what they got. My first vote was in 1975, when a constitutional crisis was precipitated when the supply bill for Whitlam's Labor government was blocked by the Senate. By the way, Labor has hated the Senate ever since, and still does, so that the current party wants to defund that body by limiting its power to do things again like blocking power, by blocking supply, I mean. But I digress. An impasse was there. The Governor-General, the Queen's representative in Australia, did what I still believe was the right thing. He dissolved Parliament and put the matter to the people to decide. And I remember some of the political campaigning. Malcolm Fraser's Liberal Party had ads depicting what it called the Canberra octopus. Labor's grab for more power, for bigger government, for more central control. Liberals won, thankfully, as far as I'm concerned. For the record, that was the last time I ever voted Liberal either. But back to the overseas experience. And the lesson that we need to learn is that at the end of the day, the Constitution is a piece of paper about as much value as Chamberlain's Munich Agreement with Hitler. My final territorial claim on Europe, just before Hitler tried to grab the whole lot. Yep, that one. Or Obama's Keep Your Doctor and Health Care plan, just before he brought in Obamacare by mere presidential executive order, and then you got no doctor or any healthcare plan but just huge increases in health care. Now, my point is, we have to remember that the Constitution is an important piece of paper, but it's still just a piece of paper, and it can never protect anyone unless its provisions are actually observed. That's the point. It needs to be defended and observed. So, what do I mean by soft dictatorship? It's not dictatorship by tanks driving down the main street, or torture chambers, or secret police, but it is the more subtle kind that demands the government gets to say what you should think and decides what rights you have and what you can say and even what you must say. We already have some of that, and there is more coming, especially if Shorten's Labor Party gets into power. Tasmania's Labor government has already passed legislation that degenders birth certificates and, get this, requires the use of the pronouns of any person's choice. Oh dear! Do you know what this actually means? Nobody knows how many genders there are according to this crackpot theory that drives this stuff. Well, I can tell you how many. It's the number after 1, right? It's 2. And therefore, nobody under this legislation can tell you how many pronouns you have to learn for each person that crosses your life. And if you misgender someone, woe to you. For the first time in our legal history, we have not just things that you're not allowed to say, but what you must say. Think about that. Or a real beauty. I've mentioned it before, in Victoria, an event featuring Stefan Molyneux and Lauren Southern, which was entirely peaceful, was protested by the less black shirt thugs, Antifa, who rioted, smashed things up, and the event organisers were charged $60,000 for the police presence. This gives the bully's veto to one side of the debate, the left. Or there's the recent egging of Fraser Anning. Love or loathe that person, this is a clear case of political violence, not an assassination, but it is an assault, politically motivated, clearly, and therefore is political violence. Bill Shorten's response was to defend the 17-year-old assaulter, which sends the signal that political violence is actually okay. But then, to be fair, a recent attempted egging on Scott Morrison was similarly quite clearly political violence, and I suppose for that one, Shorten condemned it at least a bit. Or what about the Israel Folau thing, to harp on this one again? Love or loathe what he said, it is certainly a sacking for expressing his Christian beliefs. And Shorten's response to that? Approval of the sacking. In recent events, of course, Rugby Australia has backed down and said that if Folau was willing to apologise and if he is prepared to say that he is not going to do that sort of thing, he can have his job back. And I believe Folau has said no thanks and good on him. But you see, all of this, of course, is with Shorten's full approval, and I would suggest with tacit approval, at least from the Liberal Party. Of course, there is much more that I could talk about, but we have to remember that this is happening also under a Liberal federal government. The truth is, Liberals are not all that much better. Perhaps more from cowardice rather than actual ideology. Perhaps it's just political. Maybe a fear that standing up for right and wrong is just too politically incorrect and it's going to cost votes. It's hard to say entirely. But Morrison's predecessor, Malcolm Turnbull, lied, along with Bill Shorten, about promised protections for religious freedoms during the gay marriage plebiscite. You remember that one? Turnbull was gone, thank God, and Morrison has become PM, and we're still waiting for these protections. Now, I'm not suggesting that if Liberal gets in, these problems are fixed. I might hope so, but I'm not going to hold my breath. I do know that Labor does have policies that I have in black and white downloaded from their own website last year. And these are policies that are only going to further restrict our freedoms, not only freedom of religion, but of speech, of conscience, of association. Maybe the tanks and torture chambers are not going to be necessary, but the history of so-called democratic socialism warns us that these are always an option for them. A country under Labor will eventually be one of censorship. Actually, both parties are fairly enthusiastic for internet censorship. It will be one of be careful of what you say to your workmates or to family. It will be self-censorship. It will be a world where more and more power accrues to the government and not you. And that government will be able to decide what you earn, how much of your earnings you get to keep, and so on and so forth. Now, again, as long as Liberal is really just Labor light, the end result is really the same. Soft dictatorship. That world means that you still get to vote, but it will be a choice between, do you want more of this ideology in government or do you want even more? And then, when you eventually tire of the corruption that is endemic to these centralised regimes, when you decide you want to keep your stuff, when you want to know what is actually going on, the government, not you, will have the guns. To be honest, I don't think the Liberals are that much better, but Labor will certainly be much worse. We have 6 days to think about your vote. And I hope you don't just get sucked in by the promises of all this free stuff that both sides promise. There is no such thing as free, especially when you are paying for it anyway and then paying for the middleman to redistribute your money for you. No. I hope that you start digging into what is actually driving the major parties. Might have been better to start doing that, say, about a year or two ago, but better late than never. I, for one, think that there is a lot of power within our preferential voting system, and my urge here is for followers of this video to actually make use of that preferential voting system. The power is that it is a strong signal to whichever party wins the election. And let's not forget that a group of genuinely patriotic, genuinely conservative members in the Senate can do a lot to tamp down some of the shocking things that governments are wont to do. And so how Labor hates that idea. I do this stuff because I care about my country and its people. I, for one, actually want peace in our streets. I actually want to get on with people, and I want fair and open political debates where we are actually allowed to disagree. I care about my family and grandchildren. That's why I do this stuff. And that's why, for me, 2019 will be such a crucial election. I just hope that we Australians can make good use of our vote to put in decent people who care about us. Thank you.